As a young boy fascinated with American history, I always pondered the question how American presidents came to be. And I'll never forget the day when I was in the third grade, I came across a story of Theodore Teddy Roosevelt. His story of determination, raw courage, and inspiration is truly a testament to the American dream and the American spirit, and it served as a benchmark for the 19th century presidential class. To better understand Teddy Roosevelt, you have to start with the beginning. We start in his early years. Born in Manhattan on October 27th, 1858, he was the second of four children born to socialite Martha Stewart Bullock and businessman philanthropist Theodore Roosevelt Sr. Roosevelt's youth was largely shaped by his poor health and debilitating asthma. Repeatedly experiencing asthma attacks at night had caused the experience of being smothered to death, which terrified both Theodore and his parents. The doctors had no cure at this time, so his dad would take him out for carriage rides to clear his lungs all the time to hopefully fix this. Since he was young, he always had a deep interest in zoology. And coincidentally, this was from a experience where he saw a dead seal at a local market. Growing up, he was homeschooled, mostly by his parents, and he was an excellent student. And after his father died, he inherited about $65,000, enough to live comfortably for the rest of his life. However, he instead attended college. He had given up his early plan of studying natural science and instead attended Columbia Law. As a student at Columbia Law, however, he began attending meetings at Morton Hall, which was the 59th Street headquarters of New York's 21st District Republican Association. After Columbia Law, he studied at Harvard, where he focused mainly on U.S. Navy records and their involvement in the Naval War of 1812. After Harvard in 1880, he married his first wife, Alice Hathaway Lee. In 1884, Alice Hathaway Lee gave birth to their daughter. 2 days later, unfortunately, the new mother tragically died around an undiagnosed case of kidney failure that was hidden by the pregnancy. Coincidentally, Roosevelt's mother had died just 11 hours earlier. The deaths of his mother and wife led Roosevelt to a very dark place, and he ended up moving out to the West in hopes of finding solace in the Western life. He first went to the Dakota Territory in 1883 to hunt bison, where he built a ranch named Elkhorn. Elkhorn was founded in the boomtown of Medora, North Dakota, and this is where Roosevelt gained a lot of his original skills that gave him his prominence. He would learn how to ride Western style, rope, hunt, and all around became a wood and outdoorsman in every sense of the word. He really bought into the desires of the common interest of the citizens in the West, and he was a common man, and he grew to love the American outdoors and really relate with them. He really truly gained an understanding of the American dream by moving out west, experiencing the unknown, and conquering the American outdoors. On December 2nd, 1886, he married his childhood family friend Edith Kermit Caro, and evidently, his second marriage took place so soon after the death of his first wife, it created some resistance from the family. However, they married in London, England, and the couple had 5 children eventually. And he came back to public life and went back to New York in 1886. He was quickly approached to run for mayor, but would ultimately turn that down. In 1894, however, he would take the commission of being New York City's police commissioner, where he grew very prominent as he was a very hands-on style commissioner and would often go out on nightly patrols with police officers. After his tenure, however, he became the Assistant Secretary of the Navy after the 1896 presidential election. Roosevelt had backed Speaker of the House Thomas Brackett Reed for the Republican nomination. However, William McKinley won the nomination and eventually the presidency, but still saw the potential within the young Roosevelt, as he was increasingly gaining traction within the party and had garnered the respect of the common man along with his peers. After his 1897 appointment by William McKinley, Roosevelt had began pressing his national security views regarding the Pacific and the Caribbean on McKinley. With a focus on Spain being ejected from Cuba, he explained his priorities to one of the Navy's planners in the latter half of 1897. I would regard war with Spain from 2 viewpoints. First, the advisability on the grounds both of humanity and the self-interest of interfering on behalf of the Cubans, and of taking one more step forward toward the complete freeing of America from European dominion. Second, the benefit done our people by giving them something to think of, which is not material gain, and especially the benefit done by our military forces by trying both the Navy and Army in actual practice. Roosevelt was a practical man. He knew that experience triumphed over any type of practice, and what he truly wanted to demonstrate was the American Navy's promise on the actual battlefield. All in all, in 1898, the USS Maine was destroyed in the harbor of Havana, Cuba. There's a lot of speculation about this. A lot of historians argue that this was done intentionally to start a war between Spain and America. However, officially, to this day, the Americans blame Spain for the explosion, even though this tragic event occurred. McKinley still urged for a diplomatic solution. However, without approval from McKinley, Roosevelt gave orders to several Navy vessels, including to Admiral George Dewey, who received his appointment by Roosevelt to lead the Asiatic Squadron. With the backing of Roosevelt to prepare for war, Dewey credits Roosevelt for the victory of Manila Bay under Roosevelt's orders. And thus, the Spanish-American War had begun. As the war had just begun, Roosevelt resigned from his post as Assistant Secretary of the Navy and began the first U.S. Volunteer Cavalry Regiment, dubbed the Rough Riders. His family pleaded with him not to do this, but he did so regardless. The Rough Riders have become infamous in American history as regarded as one of Roosevelt's greatest accomplishments, most notably for their charge of Kettle Hill on July 1st, 1898. After leaving the war in Cuba in 1898, the Rough Riders came back to New York, where Roosevelt and his men disbanded. After so, Roosevelt was asked to run in the 1898 gubernatorial election of New York, where he won in dominating fashion. After his New York governorship, he would be asked to be the vice president after Vice President Garrett Hobart had died of heart failure in 1899. He would take up McKinley's vice presidency in 1901, and shortly after McKinley took office for his second term, he was killed tragically, leaving the office to Teddy Roosevelt, therefore starting his reign as president. As president, he was very dedicated to the working class, and especially dedicated to the hardworking people of America. His use of the 1890 Sherman Antitrust Act absolutely obliterated some of the most notorious monopolies in American history. He brought forth over 44 suits, including the breakup of Northern Securities Company and Standard Oil under Rockefeller. In doing so, he got the nickname the Trust Buster. In May 1902, a coal strike threatened national energy shortages, so Roosevelt got involved to settle this dispute between J.P. Morgan and the miners, and he became the first president to ever help settle a labor dispute. Most notably of his achievements on the domestic front, Roosevelt was known for his massive achievement in his conservation efforts. As a man of the outdoors, he truly believed in the preserving of America's wilderness, and he created the United States Forest Service. He also created and passed the National Parks Act and signed the 1906 Antiquities Act, which proclaimed 18 U.S. national monuments, established 51 bird reserves, 4 game reserves, and 150 national parks. He also used his executive orders to protect wildlife lands, forest lands, and by his second term in office, he established 150 million acres of forestry land. On the foreign front, he was known for his big stick policy. Teddy was an ardent imperialist and vigorously defended the permanent acquisition of the Philippines after the Spanish-American War, after which he created the Great White Fleet and began to parade it across the world as a show of American dominance on the naval front and as a true proclamation to truly show that America was ready to stand on the world stage. Teddy was also known, most notably, for his creation of the Panama Canal, how he funded the revolution and the creation of the Panamanian Republic that removed itself from the jaws of Colombia. Continuing a stand-up job after his presidency, however, he ended by maintaining the record of continuing the legacy of a president by only serving 2 terms after George Washington. After his presidency, he took a brief time to work for the Smithsonian. and went over to Africa to collect samples of many different African cultures and traditions, along with many different animal species and taxidermies. After his exit from public view, a group of House Republicans chose Roosevelt to run for the party's nomination. Ultimately, he did, under a new party dubbed the Progressive Party. During a speech on October 14th, 1912, however, while campaigning in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Roosevelt was shot from 7 feet away. He took the shot to the chest, concluded that it wasn't life-threatening, and continued to deliver this 90-minute speech with blood seeping into his shirt. However, he would ultimately lose the election, taking a split of the Republican votes and feeding the presidency to Woodrow Wilson. He delivered a farewell manifesto on October 20th to 16,000 people in Madison Square Garden after his loss. Thus, he began a South American expedition where he journeyed to the Amazon River, and in doing so on this voyage, with multitude of servicemen and former servicemen, he would come down with tropical fever, which was very similar to malaria, and with a bullet still lodged in his chest from his assassination attempt the year prior, his health worsened from the infection, and eventually, in 1914, Roosevelt would return to the United States. After he was outraged, the Wilson administration's conclusion of a treaty that expressed sincere regret for the way the United States had acquired the Panama Canal Zone. Roosevelt's influence on American politics would be felt throughout World War I and the League of Nations. All in all, he died on January 5th, 1919. Suffering from breathing problems after receiving treatment from his physician, Dr. George Fowler, he felt better and went to bed. Roosevelt's last words were, "Please put out that light, James," to his family's servant, James Amos. Approximately between 4 and 4:15 the next morning, Roosevelt died at the age of 60 in his sleep at Sagamore Hill after a blood clot had traveled to his lungs. Upon receiving word of his death, his son Archibald telegraphed his siblings, "The old lion is dead." It is often quoted that death had to take him in his sleep, for if Roosevelt had been awake, there would have been a fight. And so this concludes my first video. I hope you guys really enjoyed this little deep dive on Teddy Roosevelt. I'm going to be continuing to do a multitude of videos across the U.S. presidents, American history as a whole, and mostly including the Civil War, Revolutionary War, as well as America's involvement in the wars that shaped the world. I'm really passionate about our country and how it has developed as a whole and what makes us who we are. And I really hope you guys would consider subscribing to the channel. And I'm looking forward to making more content like this and hopefully seeing where this goes. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Take it easy.